So I get stagnated, I get stalled, I get procrastinating, and small steps is a wonderful tool. You look at the task and you break it down into small steps and you pick one. Now, I've got another rule for that. Let me try to come back. Remind me if I forget the rule for picking one. But you break it into small steps, and then you pick one, and then you do it. But if you can't, if you're still stalled, then you got to break it down into smaller steps. So I learned this a long time ago working with depressed patients, and the lady says, oh, my house is a mess. I'll never get it clean. That's depressing me worse, And I'd say, well, of course not. You can't clean your house. Who can clean their house? Could you clean the kitchen? Oh, no, it's too big a mess. I couldn't do it. Okay, well, could you do the dishes? No, it's just too much. Could you wash a fork? No, I just don't think I could do it. Well, could you get the soap out and put it on the counter?
ADHD Rewired, episode 111. This is the show designed to help those of us who have really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. My name is Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, coach, and consultant. We know that starting can be the hardest part, so let's get started. But first, let me thank our sponsors. If you're going to be around this Thursday, April 14th, 2016, assuming you're listening to this the week it comes out, from 10:30 a.m. to 1:15 p.m. Central Time, join me for high-tech and low-tech solutions to supercharge your productivity. This is a free webinar, but it is limited to the first 100 people that register. Go to ADHDrewired.com for more information and to register. Still on the fence about joining this summer's ADHD Rewired coaching and accountability group? Well, this Friday, pricing goes up. Go to coachingrewired.com and schedule your free 20-minute consultation with me. That's coachingrewired.com. And prepare to get your ADHD rewired. Support for this podcast also comes from Audible. Enjoy a free 30-day trial and a free download at audibletrial.com/ADHD rewired. Support also comes from my friend Tom Nardone, who has recently joined the ADHD Rewired team as the engineer. He likes to call himself the producer, so I'll let him do that because it makes him feel better. So you can support him and the show by picking up a copy of his book, Chasing Kites. Go to tomnardone.net. Support us also comes from Adderall, because without it, I don't know how I would get anything done. All right, let's get on with the show. So welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. Before we even introduce today's guest, who is Doug Puryear. Did I say that right?
Perfect.
We practiced too. Doug's alarm just went off, and you need to take care of something.
Well, I was going to do that in a few minutes. If you want me to do it on screen, even though it's kind of private.
That's completely. We can silence the screen, and no one will ever see it. No one ever sees these videos, anyways. I keep saying to my guests that I might use these one that I haven't really used them.
Okay, well, I'll jump right in. I've got to pull up my shirt and take off my Daytrona patch and try to remember where it is, and that's a Daytrona patch, and Daytrona is. Most of you know, I guess, is a form of Ritalin that is absorbed through the skin. And what I like about it so much is several things. One is you can cut the patch and you have control over the size and you have control over when you put it on and take it off, if you remember to take it off. And I use my alarm for that because if I leave it on too long, I won't be able to sleep. But I get no side effects from it like I did from Ritalin. But because it doesn't, you're not swallowing it. It doesn't go into the stomach. So I'm very happy with it.
How long have you been on that for?
Oh, Lord. Dates and times are always difficult for me. Let's just say 4 years.
All right. So you've been on for 4 years. So now let's back up and actually introduce you now that we got your Daytrana off.
Yeah.
And so, if we see the focus kind of decrease by the end of the episode, we'll know why.
Well, no, because it doesn't wear off for about 6 hours.
Cool. So the life of it's pretty long, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's about 9 hours. You put it on in the morning, and I try to take it off by 2. By 1:20.
All right. So, Doug, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, I'm a psychiatrist, married, children, grandchildren, live in Santa Fe for 20 years now. Christian. Spirituality is a big part of my life. I do prefer spirituality to religion, as many people do. I like to fly fish and play the guitar and study Spanish. What else? About a year and a half ago, we moved to what's called a continuing care community, which our daughter thought was an old folks home, but we call it the home sometimes, but it's really not. We got an apartment, but we just got a lot of nice services here. So life is somewhat easier.
Nice. It's a nice way to think about it. Mm-hmm. So I came across, I've been seeing your kind of postings on Facebook and LinkedIn. Your tips of the day. You wrote a whole book about tips of the day. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, you want the whole long story or just focus on the book?
Just don't make it boring.
Well, that's a challenge.
Based on when we spoke end of last week, I don't think that'll be a challenge. You have a lot of interesting kind of stories, and from where kind of the evolution of who you are and how you come to be just today is quite a story, quite a lot of stories. So why don't we just start off with some of those tips, and then we'll kind of bounce around a little bit and
okay. Well, let me give the background, which is what you asked first. I didn't discover I had ADD. I call it ADD. It's ADHD. I didn't discover I had it till I was 64, and that's a story. But once I found out I had it, I understood a lot of things that have been going on in my life, a lot of problems I had, but a lot of habits I had. And for example, I always have in my pocket my appointment book and my cards because I can't function without them. My joke is that's half my brain. The other half of my brain is named Martha. And she kind of supervises me and tries to keep me on track. So when I discovered it, then I realized that a lot of my patients I'd been seeing had it. I don't know, 10% maybe, something like that. And I felt very regretful. I think I've missed the diagnosis for years in many patients. But anyway, I started seeing it.
Well, you were telling me about one specific patient that you were working with where you kind of had that light bulb moment.
Yeah, well, okay, that's the background. I do want to get to the book, but okay. I was 64 years old. I'm sitting in my office seeing this young man, and he's telling me all his troubles, and particularly with jobs. He just couldn't hold a job. From his viewpoint, it was because he had a really bad luck with an unfortunate run of bosses. Every boss he had was a total idiot and a jerk. But the kid couldn't hold a job. And I suddenly got the light bulb. I didn't usually think of this possibility, but this kid has ADD. And then I asked him some questions. It's very clear he has ADD. And about that time, the other light bulb went off, and I said, wait a minute, I got the same thing. And the stuff I was asking him, do you have this problem and that? Does that happen? Do you lose things? Do you get lost? Do you forget? Yeah, that's me. Okay. So that's the beginning of the story.
And how long ago was that?
I was 64, so that was many years ago. Many years ago. Then I started seeing these patients with ADD or realizing they had it. And I wanted to give them something about strategies because I'm using all kinds of strategies. I hadn't realized they were strategies. I hadn't realized they had anything to do with ADD, but they just made my life better. And so I wanted to give that to my patients in writing. And I went through a lot of ADD books, and there are some very good ones out there, but they weren't what I wanted. I didn't want the history of ADD, the biochemistry of ADD, how you diagnose ADD. I wanted, here are strategies you can use to make your life better. So I wrote it, and I started giving it to my patients. And after a while, I realized, well, I've written this book. I might as well try to both help more people by getting it out there and also make some money. I don't ever mind making some money. So I wrote the book, and that's Your Life Can Be Better. I just happened to pick up a copy of it. Your Life Can Be Better, Using Strategies for Adult ADD/ADHD. And it has been a really good seller. I'm just amazed and grateful and surprised. It sold over 25,000 copies. And I quit counting about a year ago because it was just too much trouble to keep track. So it's more than that.
Well, congratulations. Yeah. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah. Because they usually say it's self-published, and they usually say most self-published books sell 100. That's your friends and relatives, and then you're done. I was giving this book to my patients, but then I put it on the market. It has really sold well, and I just love it when I get comments, which I get real often from people saying it has really helped them. So a few say it's changed their life, like the diagnosis changed my life, realizing what's happening.
There's a member, and I think I mentioned this to you on when we last spoke. There's a member of my community who has actually been on the podcast in the past, Lisa Feinberg, who has said that your book is her favorite book on ADHD.
I get that fairly often, actually. And again, because I think many of us with ADHD or ADD are not all that interested in the history and the biochemistry. We just want to know, what can I do?
Right.
You know? And so that's what this book is. And okay, now there's my backup alarm, because sometimes when the 120 alarm goes off, sometimes I think, oh, I need to take my patch off. But other times I think, oh, I need to turn the alarm off.
Was that the alarm to turn the alarm off or to take the patch?
Yeah. My brain goes one way some days and I need that backup. But I already took it off, so that's good. So while I was in the process of writing the book and realizing I was going to market it, well, I'm not sure of the sequence. But anyway, realizing I was going to market it, I started doing the blog. And that was the tips of the day. And so then I eventually had so many of those that I collected them and did another book, which is Living Daily with ADD, Adult ADD. And it has not done nearly as well. It's only in a ebook. And right now I'm in the process of turning it into a print book and seeing how it's doing. So I have a little bit of mission, a calling to get this information out to people where it will help them. But I also have another mission, which is to make some money while I'm doing it.
And both of those are really good missions. You know, I know that I have a lot of entrepreneurs that are listening to this podcast. And when you marketed that book, were there any specific tips or strategies that you can look at and say, you know what, that was what really helped me kind of get the popularity for this book, that really kind of helped increase the traction for the book? Was there any specific strategies that you used self-publishing?
In terms of what really clicked with people or turned people on, I think it was different for different people. the basics, and the way I start with the book, you got to have an appointment book and a to-do list. Now, most people nowadays have it on their cell phone or whatever, but I still do it the old-fashioned way. But you got to have that. You just can't get along without it. But then all the books, I think, tell you that, and it's common knowledge in a sense. But what they don't tell you is how to use them. And if you just, well, I've got my appointment book, I got my to-do list, but I'm still just floundering through life, you got to know how to use them. The appointment book, I have to, and things become habits, which I'm big on. I have to pull that out and look at it at least 3 times a day. And I like the form where it shows me the whole month. Not just one day and one day or something like that, because I get lost in time. I can't picture where I am in time if I don't keep looking at it. But then I looked at it this morning and already I forgot I've got this 12 o'clock appointment if I don't look at it. So that's one. The bigger secret of...
And I was going to say, it's funny you say that because, I look at my calendar probably 30 plus times a day because I keep it open on an iPad so it's always visible for me today. And even though I looked at it so many times today, in my brain, I was like, oh, we're meeting at 12:30. And then my alarm goes off. 12:15 is meeting time. I was like, crap, I'm not ready for this right now.
Yeah. So... our times are different. What I thought you meant is that the other thing happens. I get it in my head we're meeting at 12:30 and we're not. We're meeting at some other time.
That certainly happens too.
Yeah. So, and the way to do the to-do list, people tell me, well, I can't use a to-do list. Well, they don't know how. So the first thing is most of us, I think, make a long to-do list. These are all the things I need to do. And then you can make another long to-do list. These are the other things I would like to do, but it isn't going to matter a whole lot whether I do or not. But these are the ones I need to do. But then you need to make, which is my red card. And
it's an actual 3x5 note card. That's red.
Yeah, just regular index cards. You make a rule. You cannot put more than 5 things on there. And if I put more than 5 things on there, I will immediately get overwhelmed. I won't know where to start. I won't know which one. And I wind up not doing any of them. So that's the real trick with the to-do list. It's a list of 5.
So what about the person that says, well, how do I know what to even do first? What goes on those top 5?
Well, there are systems for that, and I don't really use them very much, but you can list your long list, and then you can go through and say, if you want to be real compulsive, you can put 2 numbers. One on the left is how important is this? I mean, if I don't pay my taxes, they're going to put me in jail. And the other is what's the deadline? How urgent is it? So you can put 2 numbers. And if you do that, then you can go back and look at your list and you can pretty well see which ones you need to be on today. And I mean, you're going to get all 5 of those done today, by the way. But that's the 5 you need to be working on.
And I think that there's just a fallacy about people think that even people without ADHD, nobody gets everything done on their to-do list.
Right. And never. You will go to your grave with stuff on your to-do list.
I think I was interviewing Linda Rogley about 2 years ago. And it's one of my favorite things that I think anyone has ever said in that podcast was that when her husband said to her that when she dies on her tombstone, it's going to read, "Finally done."
Yeah, but on the other hand, that's not true in a way. We're never done.
That is certainly true. That is certainly true.
Yeah. So that was key. Not only do you need your appointment book and your to-do list, but you got to know how to use them. Another key for me is small steps. So I get stagnated, I get stalled, I get procrastinating. And small steps is a wonderful tool. You look at the task and you break it down into small steps and you pick one. Now, I've got another rule for that. Let me try to come back. Remind me if I forget the rule for picking one. But you break it into small steps, and then you pick one, and then you do it. But if you can't, if you're still stalled, then you got to break it down into smaller steps. So I learned this a long time ago working with depressed patients, and the lady says, oh, my house is a mess. I'll never get it clean. That's depressing me worse, And I'd say, well, of course not. You can't clean your house. Who can clean their house? Could you clean the kitchen? Oh, no, it's too big a mess. I couldn't do it. Okay, well, could you do the dishes? No, it's just too much. Could you wash a fork? No, I just don't think I could do it. Well, could you get the soap out and put it on the counter? And you just keep breaking things down for that patient or for myself until you get such a tiny step, you can do it. Mm-hmm. And once you've done that, then you're moving. That's
right. The momentum. It's like we need to knock down the wall of initiation.
Yeah.
And then we just keep going.
Yeah. So small steps is a huge thing for so many problems that come up.
I know for myself too, and when I'm working with clients, one of the things that I often see is that if I have an item that it's been on my to-do list for longer than I would like it to be on my to-do list, and I really kind of look at that item and say, you know what? I don't think that I realize that I don't actually know what the first step is. And then I kind of start brainstorming that and kind of dissecting it. And then it's like, oh, there was this whole this unspoken piece of it. And then once I kind of explore that and I figure out what my first step is. So that's one of the first kind of questions I will ask myself if I see something that's been on my list for a long time. It's like, do I really know what the first step is?
Yeah. And that's something I just read about and I put it on my blog. And I can't give credit. I don't remember where I got it, but I do. A guy named Alan.
Alan Brown?
Getting things done. Is that his book?
Oh, you're talking about now I'm having a moment.
Anyway.
The GTD.
Getting things done. Yeah.
Alan. Too ADHD. You're trying to think of a name. It's killing me.
One of his tips, which I really like, and I haven't been doing it, but I may start. He has a rule: you can't write down a thing on your to-do list without writing next to it what's the first step. So your to-do list has to have 2 columns now. And that's a really great idea.
David Allen. I just remembered.
So that's a good book. So I wanted to go back to that thread I had left.
Picking one thing?
I made up this motto, which, again, I've made a habit. And I want to talk about habits. But anyway, I've made a habit. If I'm saying, am I going to do this? Or should I write it on my to-do list or whatever? My motto is do it now, do it right, and do the hard part first.
Do it now, do it right,
and do the hard part first. Because if you get the hard part done, that's what's making you procrastinate, is the hard part.
It's like eating the frog. If you start your day by eating a frog, everything else after that is going to be easy.
Yeah. So do the hard part first. Get that out of the way. I don't always recommend that. If you are totally stuck, you may need to do the easy part first, but in general in life. So because I've made that a habit, that comes into my head most of the time. What am I going to, do it now, do it right. Like if I'm going to write these notes, better make sure I can read them tomorrow, and do the hard part first. So that's another key tip that I think is really important.
What are some of the other strategies that?
Go ahead, and I'll get back to habits. Go ahead.
What are some of the other strategies that you like to talk about and share with your patients and that you have in the book?
Well, one of the things is a basic principle. I call it the principle, and that's identify a problem, make a strategy, make a rule, and make it a habit. And habits are so important. If it's not a habit, then you got to stop and think about it. You got to remember it. You got to decide whether to do it or not. But I brush my teeth every morning. And I don't have to make a decision. Well, am I going to brush my teeth today or not? Or, I just do it. It's a habit.
Mm-hmm.
Saves a lot of mental energy. So one of the keys is identifying a problem. And the example I always fall back on, the simple one, is when all this started, I was losing my keys about 3 times a week.
Is this why you have a picture of keys on the front of your book?
Yeah, and that's a big part of the book.
Yeah.
As an example of the whole process, one person didn't like my book because he said his mother had already been telling him to put his keys in one place. But the point wasn't about your keys. The point was about how you do this process, right? So I was losing them 3 times a week. I cannot find things. That's another principle or another issue. If I can't see it, it doesn't exist. And I can look at things, and this is our brain wiring, works this way. If I open the refrigerator, I'm looking for the ketchup. And now they have those bottles upside down. Mm-hmm. Well, if the bottle's upside down, I can't see it because I'm not looking for a bottle. Or if I think it's on the second shelf and it's on the third shelf, I won't see it. So I can't find things when I lose them. So my wife got very, very tired of, help me find my keys. Not again. And so she said, okay, from now on, when you come in the house, you put your keys on this platter we had then on this table, nowhere else. Well, that's a good strategy, but then I had to make it a rule. And then I would forget. But if you stick with it, it becomes a habit. I lose my keys now maybe twice a year.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. But I have, and life is just from that one thing, life is so much better.
There was someone in the ADHD Rewired community group who posted something on in the group this weekend about how they got the Tile, which is this tracking device you can put to different devices, so track their keys. And so they got it. It's been great, except it wasn't finding the keys, and so she gives in, goes and gets her spare keys, and finds out that she had left her keys in the ignition, I guess, the whole time. And she made this comment about, there's not enough Adderall in the world that could help with that.
Yeah.
But, so many of us have been there and have done stuff like that. Where it's...
Yeah. But you got to make habits. Like, I started driving off out of the filling station with the hose still stuck in my tank. Well, that's not fun. So I made a habit, and I don't have it perfect habit yet. But I take my keys, you open the little door, and I hang the keys on the door. So I cannot drive off unless I've gotten the hose out.
I bet your patients love you.
Well, some did and some don't. So this whole thing about make it a rule, like I had to say to myself, okay, my keys go in that dish. They don't stay in my pocket. They don't go on the dresser. They don't go on my desk. They don't go on the table. They go in that dish. And screw up a few times, but it will become a habit. And the other trick, let me finish that. Mm-hmm. The other trick is you have to make, well, go ahead. I'll come back.
When ADHD minds collide.
Yeah.
One of the things that I have done when I'm trying to do something new and I really want to create that habit, when I catch myself going to the old way, I'll do it's called that overcorrection, where it's like I will undo everything. I'll go back to where I started and then restart that behavior so I do it the correct way. And I have found that to be really helpful.
Yeah, so you get the groove worn deeper in your brain.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
So part of the issue with that principle of identify a problem, make a strategy, and your first strategy may not be the right one. You may have to figure out another one. And that's another thing in the book. I offer strategies, but the book isn't about here's strategies for you. The book is about how to use strategies and how to make your own strategy, because my strategy may not be the one for you.
That's right.
You know? So identify a problem, make a strategy, make it a rule, and make it a habit. Part of the tricky part, and I think people have a hard time understanding this, is identifying the problem. I did not realize losing my keys 3 times a week was a problem. I just thought that was life. That's just me. That's life. And so it never occurred to me to try to do anything about it until my wife got fed up,
So you're at 64 years old and you were diagnosed with this. You made it through to this point without that diagnosis.
Wasn't easy.
So when you had that kind of light bulb moment for yourself, what was it emotionally like for you?
It was such a relief. And I've talked to people, some of my patients, I ask them the questions and so forth. I say, well, I think you got ADD. No, I've got enough problems. I don't want to hear that. Especially men. We don't like to have problems. We're macho, we're tough, we're perfect. Yeah. But for most people I've worked with, and certainly for me, it was a huge relief. All of a sudden, this makes sense. Why do I keep losing my keys? Why do I always have these cards? Why do I keep forgetting where I'm supposed to be? And then once you realize you have it, then you say, oh, well, now I understand what's going on. I can start working on this strategy stuff.
Did you go through any grief?
Better. Well, there's always the grief, I think. And this is, you see this with anybody in psychotherapy when therapy works, but it's particularly with ADD. Gee, if I'd only known this 20 years sooner, my life would have been so much better. But I didn't have a lot of that. Mainly I had was this relief and almost excitement, well, wow, let's see what problems I can start working on.
I know that when we were talking on last week, there were some other things that you had shared with me that you accidentally fell into medicine. You also talked about how about bullying, and I want to actually talk about both of those with you. But what I first want to do is we're going to take a really quick break, and when we come back, let's kind of go back to the younger version of yourself, probably with more hair, maybe as much hair as I have. Which ain't that much to begin with.
That was a long time ago when I had that much hair.
All right, and we will be right back.
My name is Jeff Delaney. I'm from Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I'm 35 years old. I joined the ADHD Rewired Coaching and Accountability Group. I joined it after listening to another person's firsthand experience of it. I have really, really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. What I struggled with before this, and probably will going on, is time management. I was late to about everything. Working with the group, it's allowed me to stop and think things through and work on steps that I need to do to get to where I want to be. It's helped me to realize that to be on time, I can't just be ready to leave my house at the time the appointment's at. So if it's at 8, I cannot be ready at my home at 8 because that skips those 15 minutes that it takes to get to the appointment. So that's been awesome. It feels really good to be on time for stuff. And that might be right on the dot or a few minutes early, but that is a 180-degree difference from what it was before. So that's awesome. So if people are thinking about joining the group, I totally recommend going for it. You're going to get something out of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was great. Thinking back, what was your kind of key motivator for joining the group? What were you kind of hoping to get out of it?
I was hoping to kind of get better, to just be happier in life, or maybe to do more what I want to do. Because sometimes it feels like I know where I want to be, I know what I want to do, and for some reason I'm just walking alongside of it instead of on that path. So I was hoping to move over and be on the path that I wanted. And I think that it has definitely helped. I definitely now can hear your voice saying, how are you going to be accountable for that? When are you going to do that? And what is that going to look like? Then I walk through the steps of what I'm supposed to do to actually accomplish it, rather than just go, yeah, I got to do that.
And so what are some of the things that you are, we talk about what some of the things that you're working on right
studying.
now?
I'm trying to study for a test, and it's in a couple months here.
And not just any test.
Yeah, it's the MCAT. So it's a big test. It's long. It's all day. It's going to be huge. And it's not something that I can just wait till right before and then just cram it all in. So I think through all of school and college, it was pretty easy for me to just get by, and I could just pick things up and listen, and it just kind of soaked in. Other than projects, which probably, weren't quite as good as the other grades for just like tests and stuff, because those required you to kind of plan it out. But they weren't big enough where it really made a big difference. So this test, I don't have that option of waiting. And I think in Mastermind, we talked about it, and I realized I never learned how to study. I never did study, and I thought about it, and I'm not sure if I really studied at all in college. So that was kind of surprising to me.
So based on the experience that you've had thus far in the group, if you can go back in time, would you make the decision again to join the group?
Absolutely, yeah. I would recommend it to people.
Go to coachingrewired.com and schedule your free 20-minute consultation with me. Don't wait. Early registration ends this Friday. That's coachingrewired.com. All right, we are back. We are talking to Dr. Doug Puryear. Did I get it right again, or did I mess it up this time?
No, you screwed it up.
I told you I would.
Puryear.
Puryear.
Yeah.
Such a Charlie rack with names. So talk to us about how you fell into medicine.
Well, I'll try to make it not too long a story. I had no interest in medicine whatsoever. I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. And my parents particularly scorned doctors. They thought, well, especially my mother, knew more about health and things than any doctor ever did. And they thought they were all quacks and con artists. And people would talk about surgery, and it kind of make me sick to my stomach thinking about it. And so I got married after my sophomore year in college. And I was in engineering at that time for want of anything else, because I had no clue. And the recession came. This was in 1958, and I'd just gotten married. I was in Rice, which is a very hard school, and my wife was in nursing school, both there in Houston. And the recession came. I couldn't get a job, and I had to have a job. And so I said, well, I'll go back home to South Texas, and I can get a job there, and you'll have to come with me. The nursing school didn't like that, so they found me a job as an orderly in the hospital. And I thought I would hate it. I really drug my feet walking in there, and I fell in love with it. And then I had different interactions with different patients, and I just suddenly knew I had to be a doctor. I didn't have a choice. And my grades were so bad, I thought I probably couldn't get into medical school. I was going to go to nursing school first, and I thought if I got into nursing, then from there I could probably get into medical school. So that's how I fell into it. I personally think it was a God thing, but it's worked out. It's where I belong.
No,
so thank God for the recession.
Yeah. Always finding that, the silver lining and how to create opportunities out of challenges. And I think that people with ADHD, are often good at doing that, how to find those opportunities where there's a challenge.
Uh-huh. Well, that may be partly our creativity.
Yeah.
But I didn't find it. It got thrust upon me.
Well, I mean, it's in so many ways too. It's similar to when I started my practice here. I was not. I knew I wanted to start a private practice at some point. I wasn't ready to do it as soon as I did. I got laid off, and I just signed my mortgage that week. So you know, it's amazing what necessity does to us.
Yeah, exactly. That's what happened to me. Yeah. So the bullying thing, I'm kind of in the middle of writing my next blog about this. I was a bully, and how much did the ADHD play a part in that, or how much were those just two separate things? I was getting abused at home. I was filled with rage.
And when you say abused,
emotionally abused a lot from my mother, and I would get kicked around by my father, physically. And it really wasn't that bad. I mean, I've seen a lot of patients, their lives were so horrific compared to mine, but it had an effect on me anyway. And I was filled with rage. I felt inferior. I was usually always the youngest kid in the class, and I was socially inept, and I was also uncoordinated and wasn't any good at sports. And I didn't like myself. And then I had ADHD, so I was blurting out, and I was irritable, and I was impulsive. And so anyway, when I was in the fourth grade, I started picking on kids. I would find a weak kid and pick on them. And the other thing I did, I just had this big chip on my shoulder. If anybody looked at me funny, I would fight them. And my last fight was when I was an intern. So that's getting pretty old to be out there fighting. So I don't fight anymore. And I hate to say it, but then I abused one of my sons, kind of the way I had been abused. And fortunately, that stopped, and he and I had a reconciliation. I really give him a lot of credit for being able to forgive me. But then when my spiritual change happened, when I was, I think, 51, gradually I let go of all the violence in my life. I was totally into war. I loved everything about war. When I was a kid, the other kids were out there socializing, playing sports and stuff. I was in my room with these thousands of marbles that I had organized into different armies, and I was playing war and all the war movies, and I was a Civil War buff. And then guns, I had a bunch of guns. I was shooting a lot. And I realized, partly I read Walter Wink, who writes about violence. This stuff was messing up my mind. And I would see a movie with violence in it, and I wouldn't be able to get it out of my mind for the next 3 days. And I decided I didn't like that. This wasn't good for me, and I dropped it all. So that's all in my last book, which just came out, The Bully, A Story of Violence and Transformation. Yeah. So that's in print. Would
you say that it's something that the impact and the effects of growing up, being abused, that you're still working through?
I think I'm through it. I think I would have said I think I'm through it before I wrote this book, but I found that writing the book itself was a very therapeutic process for me.
Because one of the things I heard you say when you're first kind of talking about this just now, when you're talking about your dad who was kicking you, and you had what I heard is almost a minimization. Like, it wasn't that bad. I've seen patients who've had worse, and I was struck sort of by that, where I felt like that. I don't know if you were minimizing the impact of it, and if it's something that you're still that is still having an impact on you in some way.
Well, I don't think I'm minimizing it, but of course, if I'm minimizing it, I wouldn't think I'm minimizing it. I didn't get kicked that much, and it wasn't that hard. But as you know, it's pretty terrifying for a child to have an adult losing control of themselves. The emotional abuse from my mother had much more damage.
Yeah.
A funny thing happened. This isn't about ADHD, but I really don't know, maybe 12. What would happen? My father wanted peace at any price. Would be in the morning, my mother would put some absolutely unreasonable demand on me. I would tell her no. She'd get hysterical. My father wanted peace. He would start kicking me. And I would be furious, not because he was kicking me, but because he wouldn't listen to reason from me. Just do what your mother tells you, and then everything will be all right. So I'm about 12, and he's kicking me, and I said to myself, the next time he kicks me, I'm going to hit him. He's going to kill me, but I'm going to hit him. And I didn't say anything to him. I didn't give a look or anything. He never kicked me again. It's amazing.
I'm sorry that you went through all that, but it sounds like you've taken a lot of that pain and gone through some, as it says in your book, the transformation. That must have been quite an experience going through that with your son. During as an adult child, he so he came to you and to what kind of say, Dad, why'd you do this? Is that?
No, Dwayne, he was our third child, and he was gay, and that didn't really bother me. It took me a long time to accept it. I thought it was just another way he was trying to cause us trouble, but he was gay. That didn't bother me. What bothered me was his behavior, and he was always getting in trouble. We were always getting called to school. He was always embarrassing us. Well, it's a much longer story than that. But anyway, I was prejudiced against him before he was even born. And I emotionally abused him and physically a little bit. There was bad dynamics going on in our family. When I spiritually changed, I softened. And gradually I quit doing that, but it was gradual. And then he got AIDS. And all of a sudden, he matured almost overnight when he got AIDS. And he was so brave and strong, and I just had to admire him. And that changed everything. And we had a few years before he died. He died when he was 26. And I don't think he ever said, I forgave you, but we had a good relationship. So obviously he forgave me. I find it hard to understand how he could forgive me after the way I treated him all those years.
Well, I think that, sharing the story that you just did and that you are in the book, it's sort of that whole notion of like when things that sort of don't make sense and that we wonder why these bad things kind of happen. We can make meaning through our work, through how we share the things that we've learned with others to help others and to prevent others from struggling the ways that that we have, the way that you did, the way that your son did. It's that the whole saying, whatever doesn't kill us makes us stronger. It's like, well.
Yeah, sometimes they say, God, I think I'm strong enough.
Right. It's like, please, no more tests here. I'm done with these tests.
Yeah.
So the book that you have coming out now, that one is, or that you're writing now, is which one?
Well, I've finished The Bully.
The Bully, okay.
So what I'm writing on right now is the Living Daily with ADHD 365 tips of the year, because while somewhere in that process of writing that first book, Your Life Can Be Better, I started doing this blog, and I had all these tips, so I put them in the book. And what I've tried to get across to people, and I feel like I haven't done well enough, it's not a book you sit down and read. It's like one of those calendars, with the saying of the day or the joke of the day or whatever. Or it's like a religious devotional, the scripture of the day or whatever. Except it's not dated. So you go through it at your own pace. If you don't want to look at a page today, you don't look. You wait till tomorrow. But every day has a tip on it. So as I said, it's only out in ebook, and right now I'm turning it into print. And yeah, then I've been working for a long time on my whole autobiography. I think that's mostly for my descendants who may or may not have any interest in it. But I would love to have autobiographies from any of my ancestors, so I thought I'd go ahead and do that.
Yeah. It sounds like important, meaningful work.
I hope so.
Let me go back to the bully for just a second. I think there's so much that so many of us are trying to understand about bully behavior as a way to, whether it's in schools or in family dynamics. Is there a targeted person or who is this book kind of geared towards?
Well, it's geared towards educators.
Okay.
Because my bullying was basically in school. That's where I was bullying kids. And there's not a lot of information out there. I've got another blog now about bullying, and I'm trying to gather information and put it out there. But the schools have a whole lot to do with it. And how should they be dealing with it? What should they do? What can they do? So it's aimed at educators. It's aimed at parents, because you may not know, is your child bullying or being bullied? And the kid likely isn't going to tell you.
What are some things that parents can maybe look for?
Well, reluctance to go to school, depression, anxiety, certainly a change. If the kid hadn't been continuously bullied and start getting bullied, maybe their grades drop, or their attitude again just changes. Maybe they look down or worried or something. Those are some of the things. Yeah.
And is the book is it more kind of experiential, anecdotal, or is there also research involved in it? Or
well, I'm not much of a researcher. I'm not that kind of a scientist. But my friend, child psychiatrist John Abelson, his kind of hobby is evolutionary psychology. Mm-hmm. And so I have a number of comments from him in there. He says that this is evolutionary, that we start, if I remember it, we start off grouping together to defend our territory, and our aggression is out. But once we start grouping together, then there's a question of who's dominating. And so when you're in the group, then there's this, what I call dialectic, if I'm using that term right, between how can we function together and get along with each other, and how can I be dominant? And so he says, all of us, especially men with our hormones, are wired to always try to establish dominance. And that's part of it. And then in another part, he says, when we can be dominant, when we can dominate somebody else, we get a burst of testosterone. And he says that's working like dopamine with the pleasure center. And he says so you become habituated to it. So I have a number of his comments in there about what's going on. And so there's all that. I mean, there's the evolution, there's the genes, there's the hormones, there's the family, there's the culture. And then what I'm really not clear about, in my latest blog on it, I'm not answering the question, I'm raising the question, what did my ADHD have to do with it? If I hadn't had ADHD, would I still have been a bully? I think so. Mm. And the other thing is, which, again, this might be a thing for parents and educators, I am convinced, and write this, if anybody had told me you're being a bully, what you're doing to that kid is bullying, I would have stopped. I just feel sure of that. I never realized I was being a bully.
It's an interesting thought.
And we're all different. I'm not sure that would apply to every bully, but I'm just convinced it would have applied to me.
And I know, now in schools, there's all these like bully kind of awareness types of things. And I just wonder if that almost, if that word itself is almost becoming like too much of a word that just gets thrown around. So people don't even take it as seriously.
Yeah, I can see that could happen. I don't know if it is happening. Of course, now you got the cyberbullying, which I had no experience with. That's a huge issue now.
Oh yeah, that's and that does not end for kids. I mean, you see that online if you're doing anything in the online space. It's like people love to. It's like it's the critics who like to throw punches, and they're sitting in the cheap seats. It's like
anonymous.
Yeah. There's a quote by Brene Brown that says, "If you're gonna be anonymous and throw critiques at me, I don't really have a time or care what you have to say."
Yeah. Anonymous is not good. And then the other thing that's going on, which I've had some awareness of, but is the workplace bullying, again with adults. And I've seen some bad cases of that.
Yeah. When I was an intern in grad school, I experienced that in a very negative way. So it's real. It's real. And and a lot of us with ADHD are emotionally sensitive to the environment and to the people around us. So it does have a real impact, and it's and so much of what we see in just the media, especially with this election cycle. I mean, it's crazy what's going on now, and as much as I don't want to get into politics, it's I've been struggling. I've been advised against it because there's issues I've been wanting to bring up on the podcast because I believe very strongly in them. But you know what? I'm just going to say it. This crap that Donald Trump says is absurd and it's harmful for society, because he's a bully and he makes it look okay. And there, I said it. If you don't want to listen to anymore, then goodbye. I mean, because we got to be kind to each other. I mean, that's not being politically correct to be kind to each other. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's called being a decent human being.
Well, the bullying is so ubiquitous, and the good news is that people are finally starting to recognize it. But it's just so scary that so many people buy into the Trump stuff. You would have thought he'd been carted off and locked up or shipped away a long time ago, and you got all these people voting for him. It's scary. Yeah,
it's sort of he's given permission for people to come out and say the things that they've been thinking all this time, but they have sort of known better because there's a social contract that says you don't say these things, in front of others.
Yeah, but again, I think it's a dialectic. I think many of those people also have a good side. And that if he wasn't throwing gasoline on the fire, is not just they wouldn't be saying those things because they're not socially correct. They wouldn't be saying them because they know better. It would make them feel bad to say them. Yeah. But as you said, he's giving permission. No, this is okay to be this way.
Yeah. And it's not. And we're already seeing the consequences of that, even in schools. See, people are using him to bully kids.
Oh, really? I don't know about that.
It's very... I've seen videos on Facebook will show second graders telling their classmates who are Hispanics, like, well, if Trump gets elected, you have to go back home. It's like, oh my gosh, that's awful. It's atrocious. It's atrocious.
Yeah.
So before we go too deep into that,
so my thing I'm struggling with right now, and maybe you have a comment. Well, two things. First, I not only was a bully, I was getting bullied in school as well. And I think a lot of that's the gunslinger effect. Okay, well, you've won 2 fights. Let me see how I can do against you. But I was getting bullied as well. But what I'm really unclear about is what part did the ADHD play in all of that? Well, if we got ADHD, we're different, so we're automatically targets. Yeah, but I don't know what part it played in my bullying.
Well, it'd be interesting. We can certainly can invite listeners to when we post this episode on my Facebook page to answer that question. Do you guys think that having ADHD and to what degree did it factor into bullying behavior? If you were a bully when you were a kid, I think I think it's an important and difficult conversation that we have.
Yeah,
because things don't get better by not talking about it. That has never worked.
Yeah, and naming it, like making the diagnosis, or if anybody told me you're being a bully, naming it helps. I wanted to say a little bit about the school stuff. I watched part of your podcast with Tom Nardone, who I really like. I'd interacted with him before.
He's going to jump out of his chair listening to this, just so you know.
Well, calm down, Tom. But with all due respect, I couldn't sit through the whole thing. I just cannot do podcasts. If I'm talking, I can sit through it. But sitting and listening is hard for me. But I did like it. And he was telling how horrific it was for him in school. For me, school was a breeze. I just sailed through school. I would do my homework during class, and then when I finished that, I would hide a library book behind my textbook and read while the teacher's droning on up there. Never had a test that I thought had any concern about. Made good grades except in engineering drawing, which back then you had to draw things with ink and precision. That's not an ADHD kind of thing. But other than that, made good grades. And then I got to college and I hit a brick wall. I had no idea how to study. And I thought that studying was, well, here's the book and you read it and you underline the things that you think are important and you've studied. And so I have a whole section in Your Life Can Be Better about that experience. But then I have an appendix about how to study. And in my second year in medical school, second year, I suddenly discovered how to study. And it just made a world of difference in my life.
Give us one tip from that. If you're a college student listening, what's a study tip?
Well, I got to give you two tips, and I'll try to shorten it. The first one is, and there's research, a lot of research about this. We learn best by asking questions, and kids learn best if you give them the test before they've even studied the material. I have some theories, but I don't know how that works, but it works. So what you do is you read a page, you scribble down the three most important ideas on that page. Then you close it. No, I'm sorry. You just notice them. Then you close the book and see if you can scribble down the three most important ideas on that page. If you can't, you go back and do it again. At the end of the chapter, you see if you can scribble down. Oh, okay. So you're having to retest and retest and retest yourself, and you learn it. The other thing, and I think the guy's name was Ebbinghaus, a long time ago, psychologist, with the forgetting curve, or some people call it a memory curve. If you learn something real well and then stop, then you start forgetting it, and you gradually forget it. If you get to where you remember half of it, you relearn it real fast, and that curve flattens out. And if you go back again to where you remember half of it now and do it again, you will remember 80% of it for the rest of your life. That curve just flattens out. So that's what I learned to do in medical school. I would learn today's material, the material from 3 days ago, and the material from 10 days ago. And I would own it.
Yeah.
It was exciting.
Yeah, that's how I would study too. And it took me it took me to almost fail out of college to figure out that. Yeah. So, because, cramming just does not work.
Cramming is, So I think, and maybe I think in a lot of schools now they teach this stuff. as like
probably
a
not as
preparation
much as they need to be, because it's a lot. I mean, a lot of my clients too, they study the way you described that you studied. So you look at the book and you think you studied. It's like that's not studying. That's called reading, right? Studying is when you're like working with the material, where you're putting it down and like there's a gap between what you looked at and seeing if you know it. I tell people to just go grab a whole bunch of note cards, and I mean, every semester when I was in college, I would have a box full of note cards from each semester, and that was one of my most preferred study strategies, because it allowed me to see it both ways. I'd have to pause and say, all right, do I know the other half of this information? So that was really helpful for me.
Yeah. So that was a big issue for me. So I got a lot of that in the book about how to study, how to learn.
So, Doug, I want to. We're coming to the end of the hour here, and you really shared a lot with us, from a lot of the strategies to some of the very personal experiences that you've gone through with bullying and abuse. But at the end of the day, it's looking at whatever we're dealing with in life and knowing that your life can be better. And what would be the best strategy for people to find out more about you and your books and information about where they can get a hold of you if they would like to?
Well, the books are on Amazon, and they're also, some of them are on Smashwords. Yeah. And then you got my blog, which is ADD Adult Strategies .wordpress.com.
We'll post a link to it in the show notes.
Yeah, that'll be good. Yeah. And people can email me. I mean, if people put I'd rather they actually put comments on the blog rather than email me, if they would, because I love the comments and I always respond to them. And I mean, to me, one of the main meanings of life is helping other people. And I'm sure that's partly reaction formation from all the damage I did before. But I try to help other people. That's what it's about. And so I with the blog, I do try to help people. So if they want some advice or something, I will try to respond to them.
Well, Doug, thank you so much. You've been a great guest, and I think you're doing really important work. And I hope you're not planning on easing up anytime soon. Sounds like you have a lot more to share.
Well, I'm driven. I don't see myself easing up. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye. If starting is the hardest part, finishing is a close contender. And here we are at the final stretch. And if you're new to the show, welcome to ADHD Rewired. We are more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. You could see full outline of this and all other episodes with all the links and resources mentioned on today's show at ADHDrewired.com. As always, there are a number of ways you can support this podcast. Make it a mission to tell at least one person this week about the podcast. And if you're with them in person, ask them for their phone and subscribe to the podcast for them right there. If you haven't done so already, please go to iTunes or Stitcher and leave an honest rating and review. Yes, it makes a huge difference. Set a reminder so you don't forget. You think I'm kidding? I know some of you have been listening for 2 years. Yes, this podcast is just about coming up on its 2-year anniversary. And you still haven't left a review. Seriously? Come on, send me some 5-star love. And thank you. You can also help support this podcast by checking out my sponsors. I use Zoom video conferencing every day, and so can you. Go free or go pro. But please go to erictivers.com/Zoom so they know that I sent you. And get a free audiobook from Audible at audibletrial.com/ADHD-rewired. And next time you shop Amazon, use the Amazon search portal at my website. A small percentage of your purchase will go to support this show, and it doesn't cost you any extra. Get a jump start on your summer productivity. Our coaching and accountability group begins May 16th. These groups sell out fast. Go to coachingrewired.com for more information and to schedule your free screening call with me today. Do you know that I give talks and all-day workshops? If your school, business, organization, or conference planning committee is looking to hire that person to give an incredible, educational, inspirational talk on ADHD, then look no further than erictivers.com. Click on Talks at the top of the page. Don't just be a passive listener. Become an active member of the ADHD Rewired community. We're on Facebook. You can like our page, but submit your request to join our free and growing community. Watch for a message from me on Facebook because I screen everyone before they come into the group. Production support for this podcast comes from the master of mediocrity himself, Tom Nardone. Go to tomnardone.net to check out his blog, podcast, and to get a copy of his awesome personal memoir, Chasing Kites. Hey, Tom, do you have anything to add? Until next time.